The cold floor bit into her knees, the metal damp with condensation and the faint scent of oil and ozone clinging to every breath. It had been 3 sleep cycles since she'd last seen light. Maybe 4. The concept of time blurred when there were no stars, no sky, only the sterile hum of containment. Her fingers, clawed but delicate, trembled as she clutched the thin cloth given to her, if it could be called that. It didn't warm her. It didn't comfort her. Nothing did anymore. The others had been taken already. Some had screamed, others wept silently. She had heard nothing from them since. At first, she tried to listen, hoping to recognize a voice, a sign they were still close. But the silence afterward was worse than any scream. It was as if they had been swallowed whole by the darkness beyond the steel doors. She remembered her mother's last words. Soft, choked, rushed as soldiers stormed their village. If they find you, don't speak. Don't run. Just disappear. Her mother had pushed her into a hollow under their living platform and covered the opening just before the sounds came. Screams. Fire. The sound of cracking trees and crumbling walls. And then, silence again. Until the heavy, unnatural voice of a translator unit boomed through the smoke. Surrender peacefully. You will be relocated. They said the humans were monsters. Everyone said so. Ancient stories warned of them, a race born from fire and rage, with no empathy for weaker species. They destroyed entire biospheres, mined planets to the core, and took younglings for consumption. Their appearance was always painted as towering beasts in metal shells, their faces hidden behind visors that glowed like hellfire. The stories said they didn't bleed red, but drank it. She had believed them. Every word. That belief hardened into terror when the door finally opened, groaning like an old beast being disturbed. Light, bright and merciless, flooded the small holding cell. She threw her arm over her face and cowered in the corner, too frightened to cry. Footsteps followed. Not many, just one pair. Slow. Measured. The sound was oddly patient, not the chaotic stomp of rage or cruelty. It was controlled. Heavy. She risked a glance. Tall. Armored. Everything she feared. The black suit covered him from neck to foot. His face was hidden behind a smooth, reflective plate. A faint glow, just like the stories. A weapon rested on his back, and she froze, remembering the way her uncle had been torn apart by something similar. He didn't speak. She expected shouts. Orders. Pain. Instead, he crouched, lowering himself slowly, one knee touching the ground. The motion confused her. Why would a predator kneel? He reached into a compartment on his belt, slowly, deliberately. No sudden moves. No raised weapon. Then he pulled out a small object. Round. Colorful. It shimmered under the light. It wasn't a weapon. He rolled it gently along the ground, letting it stop just before her foot. She didn't move. Her eyes darted between the object and the human. Still silent, he tapped his chest. Once. Then tapped the floor beside him. Slowly, he pressed his hand, open palm, flat on the floor and tilted his head. Was it a gesture? A sign of peace? Or some human ritual before devouring prey? She didn't understand. Her stomach growled, betraying her fear. She hadn't eaten in 2 cycles. Not since the tasteless protein sludge the machine dispensed before failing altogether. Still, she didn't move. She didn't trust him. The human didn't advance. Instead, he stood slowly, nodding once, and turned away. The door closed behind him without a sound. The object remained. She stared at it for what felt like hours. Her hunger eventually won. Cautiously, she reached out, plucking the round thing between 2 fingers. It was wrapped in a strange material. She sniffed it. Sweet. Unfamiliar. With great care, she pulled at the wrapping. Inside was a translucent orb, bright red. Hard. Smooth. She tapped it with her nail. No poison. No immediate danger. She placed it in her mouth. Sweetness flooded her senses. Rich. Full. Nothing like the bland sustenance she was used to. She had never tasted anything like it. The walls didn't melt. She didn't fall unconscious. He hadn't tried to kill her. Why? The next day, or what she assumed was the next, he returned. Again, just one human. Again, no words. This time, he placed a thin square on the floor, a warming pad, and slid it toward her. She didn't move, but she didn't back away either. He set down another small wrapped item and sat across the room. Quiet. Still. She didn't understand this kind of danger. The silent kind. The patient kind. It didn't fit the stories. He came again. And again. Never speaking. Never taking. Always bringing. Sometimes it was a toy, small, simple, something that spun or blinked. Once a blanket. Another time, a glowing cube that made soft music when tapped. Each time, he waited a while, sitting unmoving, then left without comment. She began to expect him. Her fear dulled, not gone, but numbed by routine. She started eating in front of him. Then sitting closer. She never spoke, but once she nodded when he tapped his chest and said what she assumed was his name. Hayes. The sound echoed in her mind, unfamiliar and heavy, but not threatening. One day she coughed. The cold had taken its toll. She shivered, nose leaking, eyes heavy. He noticed. For the first time, he moved quickly. He pulled off his jacket and draped it around her. It was far too big but warm. His body heat still lingered in the fabric. She didn't recoil. Something shifted inside her that night. A realization she didn't want to believe. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe this human wasn't a monster. But if he wasn't, what was he? The days blurred together, but her fear had not vanished, it had only changed shape. Where once it was a clawing panic in her chest, it had become a cautious weight behind her eyes. She no longer flinched at every sound, but the tension never fully left her small shoulders. Still, she waited every day now for the sound of the door sliding open, and when it did, the anxiety came with a strange, unfamiliar relief. The human, Hayes, had become routine. And routine meant safety, in a world where everything else had been torn apart. She hadn't yet spoken to him. Not even once. But he didn't demand words. His patience seemed boundless. He would sit for long stretches, sometimes showing her strange objects, a flat panel with shifting colors, or a cube with pulsing lights that responded to touch. He watched her reactions closely, not as a scientist would a specimen, but as someone trying to understand. Trying to connect. And over time, a strange rhythm developed. She would take what he offered, move a little closer, make tiny gestures. He never mirrored her exactly, but his responses were thoughtful, measured. One day, he brought something different. A folded sheet of paper, printed with images. At first, she didn't understand. The paper showed creatures, animals, some with feathers, others with fur, some large and terrifying, others small and gentle-looking. Her eyes lingered on one in particular, a tiny, wide-eyed mammal held in the arms of a human child. The child was smiling. Not baring teeth like a predator, smiling. She pointed to the image. Hayes nodded once, then tapped the paper. He made a soft sound, an approximation of the creature's name, perhaps. Then he tapped the image of the child. Slowly, he pressed a hand to his own chest. She tilted her head. Confused. He waited. Then he pointed again to the child, to himself, and finally tapped his chest again. It dawned on her slowly. He was trying to show her what humans were. That they didn't just destroy. That they also held, protected, nurtured. She didn't know what to do with that. She lay awake that sleep cycle, staring into the shadows. Her people had never spoken of humans this way. They were terrors. Forces of destruction. But now, the memories of fire and screaming were at odds with this one, this quiet, patient man who brought her warmth and food and strange pictures of soft things. And then came the night when everything changed. The alarms rang first, shrill, cutting. Red lights bathed the corridor in pulses. The metal vibrated underfoot. She crouched low in the corner, body shaking, heart threatening to burst. Was it an attack? Was someone coming to take her? Was Hayes among those alarms? Was he one of the monsters now returning to their true form? The door slammed open, harder than usual. For the first time, he entered quickly, breath short, armor marked with soot. His visor was lifted. She saw his face. And nothing in the stories had prepared her for that. He had no fangs, no glowing eyes. Just a face, lined, weathered, human. He wasn't beautiful, not by her people's standards, but there was no malice there. Only urgency. Concern. He crouched and extended both hands, motioning toward her. For the first time, she heard real human words, not through a translator. His voice was rough, low, but there was something soft beneath it. She didn't understand the words. But she understood the tone. He needed her to trust him. Something deep inside her rebelled, a survival instinct screaming not to go. But something else, something growing stronger with each passing day, overrode it. She nodded. He exhaled sharply. Relief. Then gently scooped her up in both arms and pulled her close to his chest. The fabric of his uniform was rough, but warm. His heartbeat was fast, strong. She clung to him, not because she understood the situation, but because, somehow, he felt safer than the walls around her. They moved through corridors lit by emergency lights, past empty rooms, flickering signs. She saw the chaos, signs of struggle, overturned equipment, something burning in the distance. But Hayes never faltered. His grip stayed firm, protective. Eventually, they reached a small hangar. A vessel waited, small, compact. Another human stood near it, helmet on, voice barking into a communicator. When she saw the second human, her fear returned in a jolt. She gripped Hayes tightly, pressing her face into his chest. He noticed. He said something to the other human, quick, sharp. The tone was protective. Defensive. The second human backed off. Inside the vessel, she was strapped into a seat, wrapped again in that same jacket. Hayes sat beside her, fingers moving across a glowing panel. The ship trembled, then lifted. The world outside the window fell away, swallowed by stars. She turned her gaze toward him again. He caught her stare. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, reaching into a side pouch, he pulled out another candy, the same kind from that first day, and offered it. Her hand moved slowly. She took it. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably. He didn't see her as cargo. Or a burden. Or a creature from a ruined world. He saw her. He saw a child. The journey was short, but in silence, it stretched into something sacred. She didn't know where they were going, and he didn't explain. But it didn't matter. Because she had already decided, this human was not the monster of her people's stories. And she would follow him. Not out of fear, but trust. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. And that truth, that change, was more terrifying and beautiful than any war. The shuttle descended into atmosphere with a hum, the sky outside glowing soft blue as clouds passed beneath them. The tiny alien girl sat strapped into her seat, clutching the edge of the fabric around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the viewport. This was not her world. The contours of the land, the massive oceans, the strange color of the trees, it was all foreign. And yet, the fear that had once accompanied every unfamiliar sight had dulled. Hayes sat beside her, silent but close, his posture relaxed, head tilted slightly her way as if listening to something deeper than words. Once they landed, the door hissed open, revealing a small facility surrounded by open sky. There were no crowds, no loud noises. Just a quiet expanse and a few other humans moving with purpose but not panic. One of them approached, a woman in medical clothing, carrying a device in one hand. The girl tensed. Her first instinct was to shrink away, to retreat into herself again. Hayes spoke, a short sentence, and the woman paused. Then, slowly, she knelt down and placed the device on the ground, backing away. No sudden movement. No pressure. She realized something in that moment. These humans were careful with her, not because they feared her, but because they understood what fear could do to someone small and displaced. It wasn't dominance. It was awareness. And that difference meant everything. Inside the building, things were cleaner, brighter. It wasn't military like the last place. The walls weren't reinforced steel. They were smooth, painted, even decorated with colors she didn't recognize but found strangely calming. A room had already been prepared. Not a cell, not a containment unit. A real room, with soft surfaces, ambient lighting, and even objects, books, toys, something resembling art. She touched nothing at first. Just stood silently as Hayes adjusted something on the wall panel, then gestured for her to sit. Eventually, hunger returned. She hadn't noticed how long it had been. He offered food again, different, but carefully portioned. This time, she ate without suspicion. And when she finished, he handed her something unexpected, a small object shaped like a sphere, warm to the touch, with patterns etched across its surface. It vibrated lightly in her hands. She stared, unsure. He pulled out another, held it between his fingers, and activated something on its surface. A soft projection appeared, showing a scene of moving light and shape. Not words, images. A story? She watched, captivated. They were showing her how to communicate. Each night they practiced. The glowing spheres changed, becoming more complex. She began recognizing patterns, linking sounds to shapes, expressions to meanings. Slowly, her mind adapted. One night, after weeks of practice, she repeated a sound. A human word. Hayes looked up, surprised, then smiled, not a threatening one, but real. Encouraging. She tried again. Another word. He responded with a gentle nod. That night, for the first time, she said his name aloud. From there, her progress accelerated. They introduced her to basic human language, spoken and visual. She picked up gestures, expressions, even the subtle cues in tone and eye movement. And with every milestone, Hayes didn't cheer or demand. He simply stayed close, consistent, unshaken. That steadiness became the foundation for her confidence. He was her constant in a world she still didn't understand. But understanding would come, because these humans weren't pushing her. They were inviting her. One day, she asked him a question, her first full sentence. She wanted to know where her planet was. What had happened? The question made his expression shift. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. He knelt beside her, picked up the projection sphere, and let it speak for him. She watched as images unfolded, a devastated colony, overrun by internal conflict, not invaded. Her people had been betrayed from within. When the humans arrived, it wasn't for conquest. It was rescue. They had found survivors, few and scattered. Many hadn't made it. She had. Barely. It wasn't just her planet that was gone, it was her people. Or most of them. She was one of the last. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't cry. Her kind didn't cry the way humans did. But something broke inside quietly. She turned away. He didn't speak. He didn't try to soothe her with empty words. Instead, he placed something beside her, a data pad, showing not only the tragedy, but the humans who had helped those they could. Faces, names, actions. Not warriors, not conquerors, medics, engineers, even teachers. They weren't what she thought they were. And maybe, she wasn't what they thought either. In the days that followed, she met others. Humans who worked in this facility, scientists, caregivers, even other children, some of them alien like her. She was introduced slowly, always with Hayes nearby, always with permission. The more she saw, the more the illusion of the monster unraveled. These weren't the destroyers her people feared. They were something much more dangerous to her worldview. They were kind. One night, alone with Hayes, she asked him why. Why help? Why care? His answer was simple. Because you matter. 3 words. But they struck deeper than any translation device ever could. She had expected experiments, interrogation, maybe even abandonment. What she got was protection, education, and a strange new kind of family. She began to laugh occasionally. Hesitant, awkward but real. She drew pictures, copied symbols, told stories of her own, tentatively, then with growing detail. Her memories weren't all pain. There had been light once. Joy. Laughter among her kind. Hayes listened to those stories without judgment. He even shared some of his own. Of Earth. Of oceans and forests and animals who sang at night. She began to ask more questions. Not just about her people, but about humans. How they lived. What they valued. Why they did things that seemed strange to her. He didn't answer all of them. Some he didn't know. But he never dismissed her curiosity. And so, she started to hope. Hope that her story didn't end with destruction. Hope that she wasn't just a relic of a fallen race. Hope that maybe, with enough time and trust, she could build something new. She was still afraid, sometimes. Of sudden noises, of distant memories, of losing what little she had gained. But fear was no longer her guide. Understanding was. And the human who once represented everything she had feared was now the one thing anchoring her to this new life. She stood by the observation window, watching the Earth's horizon curve beneath the orbiting station. The stars didn't flicker here, just shone with constant, cold light. She understood now what the humans meant when they said space was quiet. There was no battle here, no fear. Just distance and time. The scientists had concluded their assessments months ago. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't even particularly unique in terms of biological threat. What made her important was something else: her perspective, her survival, and the growing emotional intelligence she displayed in human company. She had gone from hiding behind shadows to participating in group studies, even joining educational programs set up by United Nations-backed institutions. Hayes had remained her guardian, though she had grown enough to no longer need constant supervision. Still, he never strayed far. Their bond had shifted from protector and charge to something more familial. There were no documents for what he was to her now, no legal category that matched. But he was there, and in every way that mattered she trusted him. The humans had been patient, but they had questions. About her species' culture, language, technology, and above all, what they remembered of the downfall. She answered what she could. Not all of it was useful. Some was distorted through trauma, some just incomplete. But there were gaps the humans filled in themselves. Artificial intelligence systems helped reconstruct events, analyze genetic memories encoded into her biology. They began building a larger picture of a civilization too ambitious, too fragile, and too divided to survive its own brilliance. She watched them process this knowledge with sadness. The humans weren't triumphant in their analysis. They were somber. As if realizing how close they, too, might come to such a fate. They never said it out loud, but she could see it in the way some of them paused after reviewing a report, or adjusted their tone when speaking to her. They understood loss, even if it wasn't theirs. What surprised her most was their respect. Not for power or science, but for the grief of a child who carried the memory of a fallen people. They didn't worship her, didn't isolate her. They integrated her slowly into the systems they used for orphaned extraterrestrials, rare, but not unprecedented. The Earth Council had protocols. Still, there was something different here. The humans who worked with her had started learning her native words. Not just scholars, but engineers, artists, even children who sent her drawings with captions in hybrid dialects. The world was adjusting to her, just as she was adjusting to it. Yet not everything was gentle. She had begun hearing whispers, among soldiers, on secured comms, in restricted reports Hayes didn't always let her read. The galactic frontier was growing tense. Skirmishes had broken out on the edge of human-settled space. Something was stirring. Rumors of new threats. Or old ones rising again. Hayes had mentioned it only once, over a meal, saying simply, "We're not alone, and not everyone wants peace." She had seen the scars of war in human history classes. Earth had known centuries of conflict before its fragile unity. And still, it carried weapons in orbit, defense networks, emergency protocols for extraterrestrial encounters. They were not naive. But they were also not cruel. They didn't strike first unless provoked. And they had been provoked. One night, the station lights flickered. Protocols activated. She felt it before anyone said a word. The silence changed. There was a vibration under the walls, not mechanical, emotional. Something was coming. The transmission arrived shortly after. An unknown fleet had crossed into human space. Not pirates. Not scavengers. Coordinated. Armed. Intentions unclear, but patterns matched historical invasions. Panic didn't spread, but activity intensified. She wasn't kept in the dark. Hayes showed her the analysis, the trajectories, the probability models. Earth's leadership wasn't taking chances. They had mobilized fleets, enacted diplomacy protocols, and fortified colonies near the zone of contact. She asked him if this was how her world's end had begun. He didn't answer with words. He handed her a secured pad. On it was a list of systems being evacuated, children being relocated, scientific archives being duplicated and hidden across distant outposts. The humans were preparing, but not for surrender. For survival. She insisted on helping. Not out of vengeance, but because she remembered the helplessness of watching a sky burn and being too small to stop it. She began consulting with linguistic teams, analyzing intercepted transmissions from the unknown fleet. She picked up anomalies, syntax patterns that didn't match the main language. She found similarities in sound frequency to ancient dialects her ancestors once spoke. She brought this to the humans, and they listened. Not because she was right, though she was, but because they respected what she'd proven. That she wasn't just a survivor. She was an ally. Her data helped crack the communication code, revealing that the invading fleet had splintered from a once larger coalition, now fractured. Their purpose wasn't domination. It was desperation. Their systems were collapsing. They wanted habitable zones, resources, safety. It wasn't peace they sought, it was room to breathe. Still, Earth would not yield its safety for pity. Hayes made that clear when she asked if negotiation was possible. "We protect first," he said. "Then we talk." She offered to speak on their behalf, as a neutral voice, someone who had seen destruction and could speak both to survivors and aggressors. The Council agreed cautiously. It was dangerous, but symbolic. A child of a fallen world, now standing with humanity. The diplomatic transmission was recorded and sent with layered translation. She stood in front of the camera, voice steady, language precise, eyes unblinking. She told them what she had seen, what she had lost, and what she had found. Not weakness, not naivete, but strength that chose restraint over revenge. The signal was acknowledged. A response came. Not agreement, not surrender. But delay. Enough to begin talks. Enough to prevent war, for now. She returned to her room that night exhausted but calm. The humans hadn't asked her to be a hero. They had just listened when she volunteered. And in doing so, had made her feel something her kind had always dismissed as myth. Belonging. The conflict wasn't over. The danger remained. But for the first time since her rescue, the stars didn't feel so lonely. She was no longer a remnant. She was part of the story being written now, not by blood, but by choice. And that made all the difference. The corridors were quiet after the transmission. The temporary ceasefire had given Earth time to move its forces into more stable positions, but the tension hadn't disappeared. High Command knew it was fragile, no treaties signed, no firm commitments, only silence and delay from the opposing fleet. A pause. Nothing more. For many, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push. Yet even in that silence, something had changed. Across human space, news of the tiny alien girl who had faced down fear with reason and compassion had spread. She had no official title, no medals, but her words had softened the edge of war. Not everyone saw it that way. Some in the colonies, especially those near the invasion zones, questioned why humanity listened to a child of another world. But those closest to the center, those in orbit, on the Council, among the defense forces, had witnessed the transformation. She wasn't just a refugee anymore. She was a voice that echoed through two civilizations, one fallen and one still standing. Hayes had remained by her side. He never said much about what it meant to him, watching her grow, speak, command the attention of leaders. But his actions told the story. He deferred to her when it came to alien dialects. He stood behind her when others tried to talk over her. He listened when she questioned Earth's decisions, and he always answered honestly. He knew she wasn't asking out of rebellion, but because she had earned the right to understand. The other aliens who had aligned with the invading fleet eventually made contact. Hesitant, unsure. The girl's message had touched them too. Some had splintered off from the main force, seeking alternative arrangements with Earth, trade, relocation, even cultural exchange. For the first time in decades, diplomacy outpaced destruction. It wasn't perfect. But it was working. The girl found herself at the center of it all. Delegates requested her presence. Not as a political figure, but as a living reminder. Of loss, yes, but also of survival, adaptation, and something even more powerful, empathy across species. She never pretended to be an expert. She spoke only what she knew, and what she felt. And somehow, that truth held more weight than entire treatises written by ambassadors. One delegation from a minor world told her privately that seeing a human raise a child of their former enemy had shattered every fear they had of Earth. They had assumed the humans were ruthless, warlike, imperial. But the image of a hardened soldier standing behind a girl who should have been an enemy had changed everything. That moment, they said, was worth more than fleets. Still, the political machine moved forward. Earth's alliance expanded. Defense budgets rose. Technologies were shared, colonies fortified. The threat wasn't gone, it had only been paused. But now, Earth wasn't preparing alone. Species once scattered and terrified had started looking to Earth as a stabilizing force. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity, once feared for its unpredictable nature, had become the anchor in the storm. As the girl grew older, her features began to shift. Her biology was not entirely humanoid, but her body adapted to Earth's gravity and ecosystem. She still required special nutrition, but her appearance was less alien now. People noticed. She was often mistaken for a hybrid in passing. This caused its own wave of public speculation. Debates erupted. Some lauded the integration as a new era of coexistence. Others feared it symbolized the dilution of human identity. But through it all, she spoke only when it mattered. She never campaigned. Never asked for praise. She just kept working, studying, advising. Quiet, focused, and calm. She didn't crave attention. She had lived too close to extinction to care for vanity. Then came the moment Earth had both dreaded and prepared for. The ceasefire was broken, not by war, but by an appeal. The remnants of the enemy fleet, worn down by logistical collapse and internal dissent, sent a full diplomatic request to Earth. They didn't ask for surrender. They asked for help. It wasn't a trap. Surveillance confirmed the sincerity. Their systems were breaking down, their homeworlds uninhabitable, their command structure eroded. They asked for relocation. Not conquest. Not assimilation. Just survival. The decision was not easy. Earth's council debated for weeks. Protests broke out. Memories of the invasion still lingered. Millions had been displaced, resources consumed, borders strained. But in the final session, one voice stood out, not from a politician, not from a general, but from the girl who had once hidden in fear. She spoke not of forgiveness or trust, but of consequence. Of what happened when a species collapsed without a witness. Of what could grow when survival was shared, not hoarded. She didn't excuse what had been done. But she reminded them what Earth had become because it had chosen empathy. She reminded them what she had become. When the final vote came, it passed by the slimmest margin. Earth opened a path. Controlled migration. Monitored settlement. Conditional assistance. Not as an act of charity, but as an act of responsibility to the future. The alternative was not safety. It was stagnation. Another cycle of fear, war, and extinction. The girl never took credit. But history would remember her. The tiny alien once feared by Earth's protectors, who had grown to become its quiet conscience. Years later, a monument was placed at the orbital station where she had first arrived. It didn't depict her form. It didn't show her face. Just a silhouette of a child reaching out toward a planet, with a single inscription. Understanding begins where fear ends. She returned to that station once in adulthood, briefly, unannounced. She stood by the observation window where it had all begun. The curve of Earth still glowed beneath the stars. The silence remained. But now, it felt full. She closed her eyes and listened, not for danger, but for the heartbeat of a world she now called home. And this time, she smiled.